President Trump addresses the nation while he's being treated for COVID-19 at Walter Reed Medical Center. Let's bring in Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, who is live on the phone from Walter Reed. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Nice to be with you. And obviously, this is an important day as the president continues to improve and is ready to get back to a normal work schedule. He's already this morning, we've already had a couple of discussions on items that he wants to get done. Candidly, has already tasked me with getting some declassification rolling in a follow-up to some of the requests that Devin Nunes and others have made.
What are the details for today? What time will he be leaving, and do you think he should be leaving?
Well, that determination has not been made yet. Obviously, he continued to improve overnight, and his health continues to improve. The doctors will actually have an evaluation sometime late morning, and then the president, in consultation with the doctors, will make a decision on whether to discharge him later today. We're still optimistic that based on his unbelievable progress and how strong he's been in terms of his fight against this COVID-19 disease, that he will be released, but that decision won't be made until later today.
So I heard you with Judge Janine on Saturday. We got your remarks on Friday, Mark. You sound more like a friend that's concerned about his friend rather than a chief of staff that's concerned about the president. Can understand it, but the word came out that when you gave those off-the-record remarks, they end up on the record, that the president was furious at you. Could you tell us if that was true?
Listen, the president and I don't know where anybody's getting the furious part with, because the president and I have been together for the last 72 hours or more. We continue to work on behalf of the American people, and so that's just, I don't use the word fake news as much, but I can tell you that's not coming from Walter Reed or anything here. Listen, I think it's important that we're clear about the risk that the president had, and there was some real concern Friday morning. The doctor and I talking Friday morning, there was real concern that helped us make the decision to come to Walter Reed. That being said, he improved very quickly. The treatment has been outstanding. He continues to applaud the work of the doctors and nurses and medical professionals here. I think the biggest key that we have for all of America is that this president, just like he just said, is really not only understanding what millions of Americans have had to face as they've come in contact with this disease, but more importantly, the fact that we need to continue to work on therapeutics. His treatment has been remarkable. His strength is incredible, and his fight for the American people. You know, he was talking to me this morning. We need to work on behalf of Second Amendment fight, protect religious liberties, continue to fight for the values that Americans hold dear, and whether it's late at night or early in the morning, he's consistent with making sure that he's fighting on their behalf. And so I'm just thankful for so many people, the people that are tuned in right now, millions of Americans that have, and indeed people across the world who have wished him well, have been praying for him. He, obviously expressed that appreciation to some of the people outside of Walter Reed yesterday, right. And even with that was getting criticism. Now, here's the interesting thing is, they're criticizing, well, he put his Secret Service agent at risk. Well, the Secret Service agent, how do we think that he got here? I mean, we came here in Marine One. The Secret Service agent that is with him has been with him. He's been with him in cars, and yet we took additional precautions with PPE and others to make sure that they were protected. But, a number of folks are trying to just make a big deal of that, when indeed I know that myself and some of the Secret Service detailees are right there with him, right, trying to make sure that he's protected each and every day and that he returns back to the White House as expeditiously as possible.
Right. And, a lot of people, Mark, just want to make sure that he doesn't leave the hospital too soon because they don't want to see him go back to the hospital. And we do understand that the White House has got a medical suite and he can absolutely be taken care of there. Can you explain, speaking of suites, can you explain the presidential suite there at Walter Reed? Because you were talking a little bit about how the president, you got up early, you guys are already working. Is he in one room by himself? Are you in another room? Is there plexiglass? How many people are wearing masks? How do you interface with him? Is it you're yelling through the door or what?
Well, that's a good question. No, we're not yelling through the door. We actually have a protocol. We get tested every morning. We have N95 masks.
Are you all around a big conference table?
Well, so we actually have an area that actually we check people in and out to make sure that they have proper PPE as they go in. He has a situation room there. We, as has been reported, actually yesterday he was on the phone with Secretary Esper, Secretary Pompeo, the Vice President, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and Chairman Milley, as we talked about issues across the globe in terms of national security issues. So he was conducting business from that situation room. So there's several different rooms there, but it's mainly so that he can continue to conduct the business on behalf of the American people. And so as we go in and out, those are normally doctors and nurses, his Secret Service detail, and myself, a few others that actually go into that area. But it's we monitor how long people are in, and
it sounds like you guys
sure
are.
Everybody has masks.
It sounds like you guys are suited up. Essentially, you look more like you're from NASA than from the White House.
No, I wouldn't suggest that we're suited up. I mean, we're wearing N95 masks. It's not that it's not that you're actually going in a hazmat suit. I want the American people to understand that actually those would be more for medical professionals that are there working very, very closely with him. But I'm in a suit. I go in with a mask, and we have eye protection as well. But as we're close to him, we continue to engage in his room and in the working environment as well.
How do you explain that to your family? I'm sure they're worried. Is it just something that you sacrifice, just like the Secret Service agents that have agreed to take this position to protect the commander-in-chief?
Well, my family does get worried, but I can tell you, this is a message to our military men and women. I'm not having bullets shot at me, and yes, I may put myself at risk just because of this virus, but just like the president talked about, he's going to defeat this virus, and I'm not having to put myself in harm's way with bullets and really just the enemy coming after me each and every day. This is an enemy that we will defeat, and we will do that together. But those are the risks that are associated with this job.
You got two game plans you need. You need the Trump reelection campaign's got to figure out a way to get him reelected without him. Number two is you got to figure out a way to keep the economy going and the American people's needs met. And one of the things I think it's pretty much agreed upon is we need another rescue plan, another stimulus package. The Democrats think they have it. You sat in on these negotiations. Word is you were fed up because you didn't really feel the Democrats were being sincere. Where are we at now? Could there be a new sense of urgency for Democrats and Republicans? And could you tell us if we should be optimistic today?
Well, I do think that there is a potential for a deal as long as politics do not get in the way again. I can tell you that Secretary Mnuchin and Speaker Pelosi have been talking. The Secretary and I have been in constant contact, even while we're here, to try to make sure that we can find a way to move forward. But even if a large comprehensive bill is not possible because of a few things that are out there, and there's still some major differences, let's go ahead and pass a number of the things that we can agree upon, and hopefully we can do that.
She won't do that. You know the Speaker won't do that.
Well,
Chief
she
Meadows?
doesn't want to do that, but I think at this point it's incumbent upon all Americans to put pressure on Congress to say it's time to come to the table. The president has come up over and over and over again. It's compromised on a number of issues. Leader McConnell and I had a discussion day before yesterday about this particular issue. It's time that we do that, and yet there are a lot of people that continue to hurt, are waiting on stimulus, and the president's committed to getting a deal done, but he wants to make sure that we move expeditiously, but also in a fiscally responsible manner.
Well, I know you're very busy today. Thanks for coming on. So many people are praying and worried about him, and they wanted an update, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, and can I just turn one? Can you tell us what time you'll know about today, about his release today, if not?
Yeah, Brian, I don't know the exact time right now. I would think that it's going to be at the earliest this afternoon, just based on my conversations with the doctors this morning. We have, further evaluations and consultations that have to take place between the president and his medical team. But, a big thank you from the president to all of the people that are wishing him so well. He's so very appreciative of their warm well wishes.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.